It's at wordballoon.com, find it on iTunes, wherever you hear podcasts. And truly, I love doing panels, and I'm glad that Mitch lets me do these shows because I really get a chance to talk to great creators like the father of Thanos and so many other great Marvel cosmic concepts, the great Jim Starlin, everybody. Now, I hope you have questions, and if you don't, it's okay. Jim and I, I'm sure, can go on and fill the hour. But I'll start with the beginning. As I understand it, you created Thanos before you joined Marvel, correct?
Yeah, I was just gotten out of the service and went to a junior college for a while and took some psych classes and one figure drawing class, which never really applied. But during one of the psych classes, we had a guest lecturer come in, and he talked about the Freudian concepts of Eros and Thanos, the darker and lighter and darker sides of human nature. I latched onto the dark side right away. I did have a little character called Eros, but he never really got much use until just recently, as far as I went. They did do a nice little thing, Marvel independently, where they turned him into a sexual predator, and I've sort of gone with that.
Wow!
Yeah.
Crazy!
Well, you know, his name is Eros.
Of course, no, but that's great, man.
I mean, they freaked out and they called him Star Fox for a while, but I keep calling him Eros.
Eros,
it's going to stick.
That's cool.
And basically, as I went along doing the sketches, I remembered something Jack Kirby told to me, that he always likes to summarize his characters into a sentence, and like with the Hulk, it was stupidity. He was stupidity. The harder you beat on it, the stronger it becomes. And so I wanted to do something like that with Thanos, and I came to realize what he was appetite that could never be satisfied. His keeping continuous quest for omnipotence and letting it slip out of his fingers, even though he's the most powerful thing in the universe, was sort of like an epitome of what that is. And along the way, I also realized that we all have these dark things inside of us. These thoughts or these acts that we've done that we will not admit to anybody else. He, on the other hand, sort of revels in this darkness and acts upon it almost spontaneously sometimes. So that's where this crazy character came in. We had Mistress Death sort of thrown into the mix because I wanted something like the Sam and Diane relationship on Cheers. You know, I had a couple of really bad relationships myself, mostly of my own making, and I figured that'd be a good little area to explore also.
That's awesome, man. And it was interesting to read in previous interviews you've done that Thanos wasn't the big, bulky guy. And I even remembering the first time we see Thanos in Iron Man, but even before that, and also the connection with people immediately associate Thanos with Darkseid is a very close similarity in terms of now the way they look. But your original design seems much thinner, and you were thinking of a different New God design.
Yeah, I readily admit that the New Gods inspired Thanos, but it's not the Darkseid character who was the inspiration. It was Metron.
Crazy.
The crazy guy who sits in the chair and floats around the universe and does weird things. If you look at his uniform, they both have those little eye things, those visors, and he was quite a bit skinnier in my original drawings of him, and Roy said, bulk him up. You know, so I bulked him up a little bit, and as time went on, both Darkseid and Thanos kept inflating. So the similarities became even greater, and in some interview I joked that, yeah, he was the father of Thanos, but he really wasn't. It was Metron.
That's really cool. And also, created originally as an Iron Man villain. And was this, I'm thinking back to last year when we did a couple panels, was it kind of one of your last Iron Man stories? I mean, because, how did that all work out in terms of bringing it to Iron Man?
Well, up until that point, I'd been picking up little pieces of stuff here and there to work. Sort of was Marvel's first art director, in the fact that I came in there and they needed somebody to do sketches for other artists to do that for the covers and stuff like that, little art corrections in the stories along the way. And basically, the regular artist on Iron Man, he had to go in for elective surgery. So
Okay.
he was going to be out for a couple months.
Do you mind saying who? Was it?
It was George Tuska.
Oh, Tuska, sure.
I tend to avoid mentioning it because, he's still got family, and it wasn't anything serious. He
Well,
just
yeah.
had to go into the hospital on something.
Okay.
And so Roy asked me to come in and do a couple issues. And the first one I did with Mike Friedrichs, and Mike let me just run with whatever I wanted to do, and so that's where Thanos got involved. The next issue, Steve Gerber and I did sort of a humorous Iron Man. And yes, that was the last Iron Man I did because Stan Lee hated it and he fired both. He fired both Steve and I off the books.
But then you kind of fell backwards into a very important character that you've been associated with over the years. Another writer was abandoning a different character. So.
Yeah, Roy felt bad about what happened on Iron Man. He said, well, we got this one book that we need some fill-in issues on. We just started it. It's already going down the tubes. I don't know if you'll be able to finish your issue before we cancel the book, but we'll give it a try. And that's how I ended up on Captain Marvel.
Yeah.
So my firings from different jobs over the year have always turned out to be nice. When I did, they always turned out to be beneficial. When I did the Death in the Family series over at DC, they suddenly realized that they had all these lunch boxes and pajamas with Robin on them still. And somebody had to take the hit for that, and guess who got it?
Unbelievable.
So all my work at DC evaporated within a couple months, and I was forced to go back over to Marvel, and that's what led to the Infinity Gauntlet, so it worked out okay.
Absolutely, man. My God, yeah, really. I mean, think about the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and especially starting with Avengers and where we ended with Endgame, and so much Marvel Cosmic came from Jim, and Drax and.
That's all because I hate drawing horses and cars. Give me a spaceship anytime.
Absolutely. Well, and of course, Dread Star, your great creator on stuff that you did. Absolutely. No question. No, and it's fantastic, man. I mean, really. I didn't know, and we maybe have a little time at the end. I wouldn't mind going into Shang-Chi, given that also we're getting a Shang-Chi movie, and I didn't realize you and Engelhardt co-created Shang-Chi. But right now, Marvel Cosmic and more Thanos. So yeah, obviously Thanos became a big part of Captain Marvel's story, and I mean, good Lord, literally to the death of Captain Marvel.
And I like the way the movies sort of rounded it back to where it was Iron Man and Thanos.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that was
Yes.
really appropriate.
Yeah, did they ever talk to you about, like, how much for the movies did they discuss Thanos with you?
Early on, they sort of set up a Chinese wall between the movies and the comic books, which was sort of established by people who had come over to from the comic book business to the movie business. They didn't want a lot of us riffraff following. So basically, they've had that in place for the last few years. It's falling apart now.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, they are talking to certain people before they start in the productions and that. And that's a nice ego thing. I mean, they are two different mediums, and there's all sorts of different rules. And I understand not wanting to have the creator sitting there looking over your shoulder. I wouldn't want to have to be working like that. So, but basically on the Infinity movies, I didn't have any, the Avengers movies, I didn't have any contact with them between the shooting of the first one and the shooting of the second one. I came in to do that cameo. And that was really quite a pleasant surprise because I was sort of on the outs with editorial. And through a strange series of events, we got this cameo piece, and I went down there expecting, okay, I'll be sitting around in the back of a scene somewhere, no one's going to talk to us, but we can watch people shoot a film. That's
Sure.
cool. And to my surprise, as soon as I got down there, well, the first thing you have to do is sign a non-disclosure form. It's Disney. And basically, I thought, no one's going to talk to me, but as soon as we hit the set, the two screenwriters, Marcus and Nephili, they cornered me and said, come on over here, let's talk. And they started spilling the beans because they had 3 years they'd been working on this project and not talking to anybody about it. And that was the first opportunity that they could talk about it with somebody who knew what it was about. and Joe Russo's came in and got into the show on that, and I had a very pleasant time down there.
It's a great scene, and it was wasn't it a great surprise to see that scene? And it's like, oh my God, there's Joe. That's excellent.
Well, it was really strange at the premiere because they gave the first 2 rows to comic book fans through some lottery system.
Oh, wow.
And when I showed up on the screen, there was this round of applause.
Fantastic.
And me and everybody else in the rest of the theater going, must be Joe Russo fans. I had no idea.
That's excellent. No, seriously, it really was. It was great. So yeah, that was Joe. That was
Joe.
Okay. I was wondering which Russo that was in the scene with you and everything.
Yeah, in fact, it was kind of embarrassing that my one line we did about a dozen takes.
Okay.
And with 3 different cameras all the time, and at one point, I forgot my line. I'm sitting there, and Joe has this spiel beforehand, and it's like 3 sentences, and in the first sentence I'm going, what's my line? And in the second sentence, I'm going, oh my God, what's my line? And by the third sentence, I'm going, shit. And finally, he comes to the end of the thing, and it comes to me. And where I'm supposed to say, what about you? It came out, what about you? And Evans and Russo are sitting across from me, and they sort of look at each other, and Joe mutters, I don't think we're going to use that take. So that was, I proved myself to be an amateur in the acting department by that way.
Well, the good take is coming out on Tuesday. The Blu-ray comes out on Tuesday, so that's cool. I don't know are you in any deleted scenes or anything like that? Do you know?
I kind of doubt it.
Yeah.
We were just that little minor thing at the beginning, and what they want to show in the scenes are like, Chris Evans and Chris Helms were screwing up on their lines.
Sure. Well, yeah, that's true. Absolutely.
It's much more fun.
Yeah, but it was really what a great choice to show how this event that obviously affected the heroes, but really, I mean, again, it was half the world or whatever the percentage was that got snapped, and it was I wasn't expecting that scene. I really wasn't expecting to see how it affected the rest of the world, and yeah, it was wonderful that they included you in it. It was terrific.
And what surprised everybody involved in that was the controversy over the guy, the Joe who was playing a gay character. It just didn't even come up in conversation when we were sitting around the set. And all of a sudden, as soon as the movie comes out, there's all this hate mail and stuff like that. And so
ridiculous. Yeah, man. No, that's ridiculous. Well, by the way, honestly, I always feel like I monopolize these things. Do people have questions right away? If you do, I'm happy to open it up. And if not, we'll wait a few minutes and we'll get into questions. Anybody? Sir? Yeah.
Have you ever written screenplays, or have you thought about going into writing screenplays yourself?
A lot of my life is involved right now about things I can't talk about. And I particularly can't talk about Dreadstar right now.
Excellent.
Or anything like that. So maybe down to, 90% of these things that start up, they fall apart. We actually had a Dreadstar TV series set up with Universal at one point, and the producer died.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, how lucky can you get? And it's kind of hard on him too. But basically, I'm trying to stay cool about everything until we get everything where it looks like it's actually going to happen. So at this point, it's I'm trying to get some screenplay writing done, but we'll see what happens. That's the best I can do.
Are you having more meetings since the Avengers movies and stuff? And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, this guy created Thanos, and that was a big hit. Yeah, maybe we should be talking to him. I mean, I would imagine that helped to pick up interest.
Casting directors haven't been knocking on my door.
No, I
think they heard about me screwing up that line. But, basically, I've been talking to some folks, and it's what it is. It's sometimes things happen. It's like wet toilet paper thrown up on the ceiling. 1% of those are going to stick, and the rest of them are going to hit you in the head.
I hear you, man. No, and I'm glad to hear that, because that's the kind of thing that I know Dave Gibbons, even with Watchmen and stuff, suddenly, there were certainly more meetings for him, and that's great, and I'm glad to hear that, and I got everyone's fingers are crossed in terms of something happening with Dreadstar. That's great. The art of Jim Starlin is back. in publication, and it's an aftershock.
And we have another art book from Ominous Press. I'm doing most of my work with Ominous Press.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, we just reprinted all the Dread Star stuff and remastered the coloring on it, and there's a 3-volume set of everything from the Metamorphosis Odyssey up until issue 40 of his own magazine, which is the last one I wrote, and it's like over 1,500 pages. It took me 4 months to go through and just remaster the things. Every time it took an hour to 4 hours to work on. By the time I was done, I was sick and tired of Dread Star all over again. Oh my God, he's got pink boots again. All these things are hand lettered by little old ladies in New Jersey in this office that had no windows apparently, and so I had to constantly go through and make coloring corrections on the digital, the analog to digital change we made, and so it was a bit of work, but it came out kind of nice. Particularly in the later issues, I did some extra zing with the coloring things, and I'm kind of happy with that.
That's cool. And, I understand. I think it's great that there are so few Marvel Universe characters from the comic books that stay dead. I mean, there aren't that many left. I mean, good Lord, and don't get me wrong, I love Winter Soldier. I'm glad they found a great way to bring Bucky back. And we had that kind of bait and switch during Secret Invasion, where it seemed like Marvel was back. But then, of course, he turned out to be a Skrull. Would they ever, have you ever thought, or has Marvel ever considered, given, and the impact of the death of Captain Marvel was so great, but would you ever want to do like an untold story and then come back to Marvel in any sort of way?
No, Marvel editorial and I have parted ways permanently at this point.
Wow.
We've had disagreements
Sure.
in the past, but the last one was sort of the straw that broke the back, and I'm going to be working anywhere but there at this point.
Well, and I mean, again, you've done your time working for the big two, and hey, man, you're a brilliant creator. It's great to see you do create your own stuff.
Yeah, there's enough access out there to do things that don't have to go to the two main companies, and I don't have anything particular against DC or anything like that. It's just that I've done that stuff and I want to do something else. I have another project other than Dread Star that I'm working on at Ominous with a fellow named Larry Stroman. And I'm really looking forward to seeing how that one develops. And Ron Lim and I are going to be doing new Dread Star graphic novels.
Hey, that's awesome. Fantastic. How about that? That's great. Excellent.
So I'm keeping busy. I haven't gone into retirement just yet.
And do you still, like, occasionally, would you draw a variant cover or something like that when the opportunity arises for this stuff?
Yeah, when people come up and ask nicely, and I have some time, I like to keep my hand in. I don't draw as much as I used to because I had an accident about 3 years back.
Oh, wow.
I had a compressed air explosion blow out a good deal of the muscle in this hand here. And so I tend to cramp up after about 15 minutes. I found that compressed air is nothing to mess around with.
Jeez.
Yeah.
Well, at least, the writing can still happen and stuff. No, I'm glad to hear that, man, because also, you're of that generation that and you were obviously a guy who benefited from the 80s black and white period to do create your own stuff. But, for generations, the pinnacle was working at DC, working at Marvel. That was the top of the mountain. Luckily, in the 80s, with the black and white explosion, it seemed like there was room for more create your own stuff. And it seems like in the last 20 years, there's been a resurgence in create your own and opportunities are there again. And again, you've got a great body of work to walk in, and I'm glad that you're doing this stuff with Ominous.
Ominous.
Yeah, I'm gonna let you say it, exactly. It's Sunday morning after a weekend, exactly. I was told there'd be no math today. But I'm glad that there's the opportunity there, man, to do more create your own stuff, because why not? Create some new stuff and take your audience with you.
Yeah, and you get to work with people that you like Ron Mars and Bart Sears and Andy Smith are all over there. And these are all artists who really want to do the nicest packaging. So the Dread Star book is much nicer than any of the packaging I ever got from DC or Marvel, because they work a little bit harder on it, and they've done a real nice job. And I got the advanced copies of the first volume of Dread Star, and I went, wow, this one I'm going to keep.
That's excellent. When does that stuff hit the stores?
They're all shipping in from China right now.
Oh, great.
Somebody said that they saw a notice on the Ominous website that they have arrived. That may be hearsay, but I know within the next few weeks, all 3 volumes will be available, and those people who did the Kickstarter will be getting their copies first. And Sean, who's the head guy up there, Hauser, he's going to be talking to Diamond about distributing it. So the book will be out there. You know, it'll be a nice, expensive little package. We're soaking you for a lot of money. Sorry about that, but it'll be worth it. It's a really nice little 3-volume set.
A podcasting buddy of mine, Jason Wood, always refers to these new deluxe editions as shelf porn, and I get it because well, that's the thing though. You know, I mean, you want like a coffee table quality book that you can really. I mean, that's the thing now, don't you think? In terms of having that stuff. So I'm glad you're doing it. I've been talking to Ron Mars about Ominous Press and everything. So you had a question.
Yeah, these are going to be books that you don't fold up and stick in your back pocket.
Yeah, man. No, absolutely, and that's great. And also, that's like it's a nice little victory lap to have like a quality production of your stuff.
Something that goes on a shelf.
Definitely, sir.
Does this reprint the Peter David issues?
If these things sell well, we're going to get to the Peter David ones. I've been talking to him about it a couple weeks ago. So he's up for it. It's just a matter of I have to get time to scan them and do the fixes.
This is all your own?
This is all mine. It ends at issue 40 where I stopped writing the book. But we will do papers eventually here.
Very, very cool. And more questions? Sir.
Yes, I wanted to know what inspired you. You had this nice little series called Breed, and at the end of the third set of breeds, you decided to bring in every character you create that was known by the big two. So, what inspired you to create your own little end of this is kind of like a secret board or Hunter's Champions type of thing.
Funny.
Well, so many of these other artists have their little universes, you know, like Jim Lee and Rob Liefeld and different artists, and, you know, they have, you know, a whole series of comics involved and crossovers and that. I'm a lot lazier. I could do one issue. And so I just decided the story gave me a slot to put that unification in there. I did it for the one book, and you know, it was fun. It was a throwaway. I enjoyed it. Breeze was never a big seller, so maybe part of me thought this was going to help the sales. It was too late at that point, of course, but it worked out.
Just want to follow up. Why did it take so long for you between Breed 2, Breed 3,
This is pop culture, and it's a medium that is business, and the creator-owned market has fluctuated, and we did the first 2 over at Malibu, and Malibu went out of business, and I talked to some other people at different times over that period, but I got involved in a lot of other projects, you know, stuff at Disney, or stuff at DC and at Marvel, and it just never had the chance to get back to it, and finally I had a slot, and Image was available, and that's where we went. I always meant to get back there, and one day I'd like to finish off the Kid Cosmo series in the same way.
That's right,
It's going to be catch as catch can. I'm actually getting busier than ever, so I don't know how it's going to work. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great to hear, man. Absolutely. Good Lord. You know, and was it gentleman in the red? You had a question? Yes.
Yeah. When you were doing the Infinity Gauntlet, did you take exception to the Nebula character at the time?
I was going to go there too, man. Nice.
Yeah, I treated her rather badly.
Worse than the movie where they're like, you know, tearing her apart like stripping down a car?
She's a lot more oozy in my story. I don't think they could have put that up on screen. No, one of the writers up there at Marvel, when I was away from Marvel, had introduced Nebula as the daughter of Thanos. And Thanos, with his love for death and his nihilism, I thought the last thing he would be doing is actually dropping progeny. And so when I got the book to do, and they said, well, you got Nebula. And I went, oh yeah, Nebula. I sort of worked overtime to dissuade everybody of the fact that she's his daughter. at least biological daughter, and because of that, I treated her badly, I admit it. But, you know, it actually seemed to hit a nerve here, and so she got treated pretty badly in the movies, too.
Absolutely.
And, okay, if there's an afterlife, I will pay for this. So, I just have to live with it in the meantime. Thank you very much.
Donnie Cates and I talked yesterday, and he told me that he had a conversation with you about Thanos, obviously, and he said that was like one of the things. It's like, yeah, I don't want Thanos to have children. And he seemed to understand that.
Yeah, little Thanos offsprings, and I just can't envision. Yeah.
Any other questions? There we go, sir in the front.
In the original Infinity Gauntlet, where I always heard that some editors didn't want their characters.
Oh man, half of them didn't want the characters in there.
Hilarious.
Do you think you had to change because of certain characters you want to use, and they said, no, we can use it, so you had to go in a different direction, or things different at all?
Well, most of them, there was a series called Secret Wars before, and there was a lot of bad feeling generated during that thing. That it gets sort of confusing on a lot of levels. So nobody were really happy about doing another one. And I was coming in and said, I'm going to write the script, and you know, we'll do a little bit of tinkering, but this is not going to be a tail wagging a dog. Which is what they degenerated into later on, especially over in DC. Everybody got a hand in it. By the time I worked on something called Countdown over there, it was a complete disaster right from the start. But the X-Men editor in particular didn't want any X-Men in the book. And finally, Tom DeFalco, who was the editor-in-chief at the time, said, you gotta let somebody from the X-Men come in here. And so I was allowed to have Wolverine and I think Cyclops. Everybody else was pretty cool about it. They really didn't want to do the crossovers, but the few books that did do it, they found their sales go up tremendously high. And so by the time we got around to doing the Secret Wars, it was the actual reverse situation where everybody wanted their characters into the books and crossing over. And it got really quite ridiculous because I didn't know who some of these characters were. They had this one guy named Sleepwalker. And his first book hadn't showed up yet. And so they handed me a bunch of Xeroxes with no dialogue or anything. He said, you gotta put this guy in here somewhere. And I said, okay. And so we have him walking by in the air in the background in one panel. And that's his entire appearance through the thing. And so our qualified people got to be in the book.
Was Infinity Gauntlet the next big event after the original Secret Wars?
I think it was. I think there was a year or so. It was close enough where people were still resenting it. So
Okay.
And so I didn't go through, a lot of things would happen in Secret Wars. They wanted to have things that happened in Secret Wars that affected the regular comics.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I didn't go that route. I just wanted to kill everybody off. And I promised I would put the toys back together in the box before I left.
Sure.
And so it worked out all right. So I didn't create the ill feeling that a lot of the previous series had done.
So you did all the subsequent sequels to Infinity Gauntlet. At DC, like you said, you did Countdown. Were there other DC events that you were involved in?
I did a series called The Cosmic Odyssey.
Of course,
Which
yes.
was another strange
Yes.
event. They approached me and said, we just did this thing called the Book of Magic, and we want to do something like that with our science fiction characters. And I didn't quite understand what they talked about, and they left me with Andy Helfer, as the editor, and Andy just went, oh, this is fine, this is perfect. We went, and Mike actually got the second issue.
Mike Mignola, if you remember what was that. Yeah, pretty cool that Starlin and Mignola working together. That's
we never got a chance to do it again. We keep running into each other places, and we got to do something again, and never going to get around to it. But Mike had the whole second issue penciled up before the powers that be at DC finally saw what we were doing, and they said, this is not at all what we want. You know, that you really screwed us over. They were really mad at me. They said, I'm not sure we're going to be able to give you any further work after this.
It's insane.
Yeah,
It was a
it was-
great book, man. I remember that. It was
They
awesome.
loathed it, and they said, we're just gonna dump this out there, and they did next, well, they did some poster things for the comic book shops, but they said, we're not gonna do much promotion, we're just gonna let this thing disappear.
My God.
And, I think it's 35 years later, and you're still paying me royalties on it.
Attaboy, there you go. There's some sweeter back.
So I think I won that.
Absolutely. You guys, and Cosmic Boy was there from Legion, and I'm trying to remember other players.
We had John Stewart, Green Lantern, that I've always been surprised just what a reaction people got from his segment of the story. We had Superman, Batman, a couple other characters, Starfire, which I thought looked nice.
Oh, yeah.
I never really quite understood her because they would never send me to comics to give me a backstory.
Okay.
So, she would show up and do things and react on things, and I was going, I still have no idea who you are.
She's had a really interesting character journey from where she started with Wolfman and Perez, a very sexualized character, to the Teen Time animation and the objections when the New 52 started and they brought Starfire back, and it's like, hey, you're really sexing her up, and it's like, gee, I remember in the 80s she was in bed with Dick Grayson. I don't know what's the problem, but okay. Different world, and I get it and everything, but no, that's interesting. Getting back to other...
That's fascinating.
I
know
know,
any of that.
there you go, and absolutely. Well, I don't want to bore you with other people's work. I want to get back to you in Mystery in Space because I really enjoyed I really liked what you did with Captain Comet, de-aging him and making him a young space hero again.
When I was a kid, we would go up from Detroit to a place called Torch Lake. It was about a 12-hour drive back then. There was no superhighways. And I would get in the back of the station wagon and I would read whatever comics I got from the nickel store. There was a used store that I could buy older comics.
Second-hand comic, sure.
And Adam Strange and Captain Comic were the ones I was always reading. And, Adam Strange I really liked, and Captain Comic I went, these stories really don't do much. Tremendous author, Argo Binder and that, but the stories just sort of, they were like watered down Adam Strange. And so when I went back to work at DC, Dan DeVito said, why don't you do Adam Strange? And I said, okay, sure. And we started working it up, and I happened to be on Lake Michigan at that point, hanging out for a week, and Dan called up and said, well, I don't know how to tell you this, but Adam Strange is in this other story we got going that he's going to be in for a while, and, well, we sort of gouged out his eyes.
52, right, when he went blind, yeah.
And I said, so we can't use him, so why don't you use Captain Comet? And I'm sure everybody on Lake Michigan heard me groan. Okay, so here we tell the story of how we came up with the plot. Very disappointed. I took a walk down the beach, and with a half hour I had the entire plot. And I was really excited about it. And the next day I talked to Dan, and he's going, you want a talking dog?
That's right.
I said, yeah, this is Tyrone. I can't wait to get Tyrone. And I really enjoyed that. I thought the first Captain Comet stories worked out really well, and then they decided they wanted to throw. I would have loved to have just gone on with Comet up by himself and maybe do Adam Strange, but it was all crossover fever, so they wanted Hawkman, and they wanted Starfire, and they wanted Animal Man, another character who I knew next to nothing about, and who I got into the story and out of the story as quickly as possible. And none of the follow-ups ever worked as well as the first one did.
I hear you, man. Yeah. And then, of course, as you said, Thanos inspired by the New Gods and stuff, and then you got to do Death of the New Gods as well.
Yeah, that was kind of a mess also.
Okay.
Yeah, there was a writer who was going to be following up and doing the follow-up of the New Gods, and he kept on asking us to put things into the series that we were doing, including that mashing of the two planets, which they had already done in the New Gods with John Burns, but we stuck it in there anyhow because that's what he wanted. And then when the series with Art's done, he announced that he was never intended to have anything to do with our series, and so I stuck all this stuff that I had found really annoying into the story to accommodate him, and he wasn't going to use it. So
Weird.
Yeah.
Lousy.
Near the end there, I decided I'd go off and do things. By the time I got down to, I think it was Strange Adventures, was one of the ones, I knew that I couldn't continue on at that point, so I just went off and did other work at that after.
I hear you, man. More questions?
I know I'm being a downer here on some of these things, but they don't all work. They don't all work out well.
The gentleman way in the back, and then we'll get to the people who've already asked questions, but please.
How different is the MCU Thanos from your inception?
How different is my Thanos from their Thanos? When you have a multi-million-dollar film being adapted from what you've done, only a fool would expect it to be a carbon copy. Especially when they have a whole 18-film universe ahead of time. I am pleased as hell as the way the thing worked out. There have been so many bad superhero movies out there. In fact, that I've been involved in like 4 of them, or my characters have been involved in 4 of them, and they've hit home runs each time. I figure I'm the luckiest son of a gun out there. But there were some bad moments along the way. After I met Joe Russo, so we started exchanging emails, and about a month or so before the Infinity War came out, he wrote me and said, the studio won't let us do a 2.5-hour movie. We have to cut it down to 2 hours. And unfortunately, what we have to cut out is a half hour at the beginning, which is all Thanos' backstory. I had made the mistake about a week before of being on a plane and watching the Justice League movie. And that's where Steppenwolf sort of comes in at the end after all this other stuff. And I thought, that's going to make it the Justice League movie. So I'm sitting in line waiting for it to premiere, and I can't get Bob Kane out of my head. Now, Bob Kane was the creator of Batman. And during the 1960s, there was this Batman TV series, which was kind of the antithesis of everything that, Bob Kane had put in and created to this character. It was silly, and there was nothing dark about it. But Bob obviously had a piece of the action, and so when it was out there, he probably had to say, oh, I love it. So I'm thinking, well, maybe I have to practice. So I'm sitting in line there waiting to get into the theater, and I'm going, I love it. I love it. No, I love it. 2 minutes into the movie, I didn't even have to wait until Hulk gets his ass kicked, and I said, nothing to worry about. On we go.
That's outstanding, man. No, I can appreciate that. That's wonderful. And you're right, there certainly have been a lot of bad superhero movies, and you're doing okay. There were a couple more questions. I saw Gentleman in Black, yes? No, it was you, sir.
There's 2 of them.
Yeah, there's a lot of, actually, there are a lot of black shoes. Forgive me, sir, you'll be next. And then you, yes.
Was Thanos' weapon at the end of Endgame, Avengers Endgame, actually an homage to the Thanos copter?
That's funny.
Good call. Good question.
So, I didn't catch that to begin with. And after the premiere, Chris Marcus, one of the screenwriters, goes, oh yeah, that was part of the, that inspired us. The Thanos helicopter from the Spidey Super Stories, which is Kitty's comic book that had Thanos robbing banks and escaping in a helicopter that strangely had his name on the side. So I said, yeah, that's from the helicopter. So I've been going around to these conventions and that, and jokingly saying I'm never going to forgive them for bringing back the memory of the helicopter. And I was just in San Diego, and it just so happens that Chris and I ended up getting interviewed by Entertainment Weekly. And the interviewer asked me about that, and I said, oh yeah, I'm never, I laughed, and I said, never going to forgive them for that. And then Chris goes, but we had nothing to do with it. I mean, it was not based on that at all. And I turned to him and I went, you told me it was. I said, we just change the subject real quick.
Sir.
I realize at this point in your career you're going more into create your own independent, pursuing your own projects, which is awesome. But I was just wondering, is there one character that DC, Marvel, independent, wherever in the field of comics that maybe you thought, that's a cool character, I wish I had worked on it at some point in my career?
There was one story I wanted to do shortly after 9/11. It was a Submariner story, and I proposed it, and it was a whole different approach to reacting to the horrible events that went on. The jingoistic fervor that was in the air everywhere at that point, I thought I wanted to dampen it down a little bit, and I proposed a story where Atlantis is destroyed by somebody, and it's Submariner's quest to find justice on that or vengeance, depending on what part of the story. And I had it worked out where he was meeting actual real people. I was going to work Nelson Mandela into the story. He was still alive at that point, and they were still doing the Truth and Reconciliation commissions in South Africa at that point, which I spent a lot of time at. And I wanted to do that story, and they just wouldn't give me a green light. They did Namor in Love instead, and so that's the one story I would have really liked to have done.
That's unfortunate.
Andy Watson, I think, was the creator that did, young Namor, and it was kind of the teenage romance and stuff. Man, that's tough. That's a shame, because I think Namor is a great character. Yeah, since John Byrne, it's really been tough to find. Although I do like what's happening in Invaders right now with Namor. I thought that was pretty cool. I'm looking to see, yes, sir, in the back.
If they do go on with that and Warlock, what would you like to see them, incorporate?
Pip-to-troll. Yeah, no, I'm pretty sure they are. I mean, after the teaser that they had. What I'm getting rumors of that, my rumors are just as unreliable as anybody else's, is that they're going to do more to start off with, like him, so he's going to be a villain to start off. But they have a lot of plans for doing the cosmic stuff. That's what James Gunn's going to be brought back into, and James is particularly closed-mouthed about what he does. So my guess is as good as yours, but I've been lobbying for him for quite some time.
That's awesome. Absolutely. With Thanos, I loved when you came back in one of your miniseries that you did, where you had Thanos as a hero, trying to be a superhero.
Yeah,
that was pretty hilarious, man. Yeah.
Yeah, nobody bought it.
Oh, I thought it was one of the few then, because I thought it was a very funny concept, and I thought that was a great idea.
Yeah, that was Warlock throughout the entire show. He's going, it's not going to work. It's not going to work.
Absolutely.
And it didn't.
Sir, yeah.
The Thanos quest. The Thanos quest is where he gets the gems, and he's never more nasty and mean-spirited than he is in those books. I think those are the ultimate Thanos stories.
Yeah, that's awesome. Very cool. Oh, sorry.
Later on, it was retroactively said that Thanos, Eros, and were pearls.
Yeah, that's what I heard too, and I think that there's some rumor going around that Eros is going to be in the Eternals movie, but
Cool.
That's once again a rumor and nothing to be taken too seriously.
Do you ever consider doing Thanos or
No, I tended to, whenever I come back, I wanted to stay close to what my universe was, so I didn't have to do a lot of research. As I told you, I'm self-indulgent and I'm very lazy. So that's why it was the Infinity Stones were used for the Gauntlet, because I used them before, and I think Steve Englehart was using them in the Surfer at that point, so they were available and easily worked in. Yeah, that's basically it. I try to stay with stuff that I know so that I don't step on other people's toes and screw up their characters. Unless I kill them off, of course, but that's another story.
When they announced the Eternals movie, I had a lot of comic book friends who were like, man, I don't know, Eternals. I'm like, yeah, we said the same thing when they announced Guardians in terms of, man, I don't know, Guardians. And oh my God, I mean, how great it was. And I'm sure that was like a thrill to have, Drax and everything that was involved with the Guardians in terms of your contributions to the Marvel Universe. But I mean, like, I talked to Joe Quesada and I'm like, are you guys sure about using the Guardians? He's like, it's going to be great. Don't worry, everything. Because I'm like,
No, it was James Gunn who made that.
Yeah, but we didn't know. We didn't know at the time. I mean, I saw Super, and I mean, Super's a great. If you guys haven't seen Super, the movie he did with Ellen Page, the kid from Juno, and Rainn Wilson, it's a very great kind of parody of like real life people trying to be superheroes and things go wrong. So yeah, I mean, I knew he was funny, but again, you know.
Yeah, no, he
gets
was
it.
like he was made for that.
Yeah.
I mean, I hated the Suicide Squad. I just thought that was one of the worst
Oh, it's
movies.
horrible. Yeah.
But I can't wait to see the next one because
Completely agree.
he's directing it.
Absolutely. Well, there's a case where they took a great concept and made a horrible movie, and I agree with you. You know, he's the right guy to right the ship.
I've never seen a movie that had the climax in the middle of the movie before.
Well, and as I'm sure you heard too, they got the people that cut the trailers to recut the movie because they showed a preview screening and people didn't like it, and they took it really seriously. They're like, oh, we got a problem here. So they went to the people who cut the trailer, and that's why there are a bunch of scenes that are switched around. The movie makes no sense, and it's not that good. At the end of the day, and really, God, I mean, I've talked to Ostrander, and
Yeah, but
you
like I said,
know,
I'm
like,
looking
what
for
they
the next
do.
one.
What the hell do they do? But yeah, Drax and Dave Bautista, I mean, my God,
Oh,
I wasn't
Bautista.
expecting that kind of performance from Drax and that character, what we knew from the comics.
Well, I was sitting there talking to Zoe Saldana, and you know, we were talking and saying, she is my character. She's right on the money. She's the adult in the room, keeping the idiots together. And Gunn and Batista just came up with this completely unique character, sort of like a cross between my dim-witted Drax from the Infinity Watch and the modern-day version visually. And I mean, I was just surprised what great comedic timing Batista has. You know,
Yeah, you
he's
know,
massive. You know, when I finally met him, I went, God, it's like standing next to the Statue of Liberty. You know, except without clothes on. So they did a terrific job, and I find him the most amusing of the Guardians, even more so than the raccoon.
I hear you, man. No, he had a lot of great lines. Seeing the movies, and I understand you've closed the door in terms of Marvel and stuff like that. Does it make you, like, is there even a little small part of it that you go, oh, that'd be fun to revisit Drax with the, combined with what they did with him and
Well, I had a chance to do that. Alan Davis and I did a short Guardians of the Galaxy series, which I thought was kind of cool. And they told me to try and make it as much like the movies as possible because they knew I wasn't going to read their books. So we had a free hand on that. That was a lot of fun.
Okay. Another question, sir?
Yeah, going back to the Infinity Gauntlet, I always loved, for me, one of the key parts of the story was the unrequited love between Thanos and Mr. Staff. And I just loved her pivotal role there and that part of the storyline. Were you sad or otherwise felt one way or the other how Mr. Staff didn't play a role in the movie at all?
Oh, she got cut early, along with the Living Tribunal.
Oh.
He was
We're part of the original.
Yeah, he was in the original script, and the Kevin Feige and the other powers that be up at Marvel Studios felt that it wasn't quite time to start introducing the abstract entities into the Marvel universe. I think that's going to change with a few more of these Doctor Strange movies, especially with this journey into the realm of madness. I think we're going to get a lot of that in the next one. They've made a truckload of money off Thanos. I don't think we've seen the last of them. James Brolin has said that he'd like to get into the Eternals movie somehow or another, or any place else with Thanos. He was figuring it was a one-shot to begin with, and he's changed his mind. So I think there's a chance that we'll see Thanos come back, and there's be a good chance that he's got a girlfriend when he comes back.
That's awesome.
That's excellent.
And once again, I'm going to throw in a caveat. This is just my rumor mongering. There's no facts on this one whatsoever.
Yes, sir.
I have a question. Talking about the animation of movies, but have you ever tried to pay attention to what they do on TV? Because I remember, I think Thanos' first appearance in a TV series was like the Silver Surfer one they had done a lot.
Oh, the cartoon, yeah.
Cartoon, yeah.
That was a good cartoon, man.
Actually, I missed all those because I live up in the woods, and when those TV shows were coming out, I was really deep in the woods, and there's no TV transmission. So I spent several years without watching TV, and I missed all those things, and I've never got around to looking them up since then. I do watch the stuff that's coming out on the different superhero things now. My favorite one is Jessica Jones.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's the best written one in a lot. I enjoyed the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. series. I didn't think it started off all that interesting, but it's got fascinating. There's several other ones I like. I'm not too warmed up toward the DC ones over at the CW station. The rating on that is very uneven on most of them, and a lot of times they're describing things that you're sitting there watching. And I don't figure the dialogue should work that way.
Have you watched any of the DC Universe streaming stuff like Doom Patrol?
I haven't got that yet.
Oh man,
No.
it's good.
It's
really, yeah,
okay.
really
I'll
honest.
have to check that out.
No, and it's definitely a different mindset than the CW shows, which are all kind of uniformly.
It's interesting because I was just recently at a con with both different cons with both George Perez and Mark Wolfman, and neither one of them watched any of the Teen Titans.
Interesting.
Yeah, they just don't want to see their stuff up on screen.
Well, and it is a big departure from Titans. It's okay if you judge it on its own merits. I think it's interesting enough, but I know a lot of Teen Titan fans of Wolfman and Perez that are really disappointed in the series because it is so drastically different than what they did. But you mentioned Brolin, and I wondered how many conversations you were able to have with him about the character of Thanos.
We only had one conversation after the screening of the Infinity Watch.
Oh,
George Russo came over to introduce me, and before I could get my hand out to shake, I suddenly found myself in this bear hug. Apparently Josh likes to hug everybody. And then we sat down and we had a glass of wine and we sat and talked for a bit. I was blown away by the way he studied the imagery so that he could capture the motion. And this was before they started talking about just how technically and how much he actually put into it. So he wanted me to know that he did as much as he did onto the show. And so a lot of what we talked about was the technical stuff, which was hilarious because they would stick a tennis ball on the end of a stick out above his head so that they'd know how high it was.
Sure.
And a lot of shots they had to do a hula hoop thing around him so the other characters wouldn't get close enough to disappear into him.
Yep, for the CGI and everything.
Yeah, so most of the time he was by himself doing these things, but there were other scenes like the fight with the Guardians on Old Titan where all the other people had to react with them, and so that's when they really had to get precautionary.
I loved his humanity that he had, well, and again, an alien being on him, and in terms of the warmth and the pathos that he put into Thanos, and really, that the last scene in Infinity War, when he really, and he was one, and it's that great serene sort of scene and everything, and then at the beginning of Endgame, even, when he's just kind of humble and burnt from the snap and everything, and it was really interesting choices, and in a way of never thinking of Thanos in that way. Even the one moment of humanity I thought in your interpretation of was the death of Captain Marvel, where he gave him that last battle. Where he gave Marvel, who's dying and stuff, and kind of, at least in his mind, revived him and everything. But yeah,
my favorite Thanos scenes in both movies are his last scene in both movies. I loved him sitting on the porch of the Earth.
Yeah.
But I also loved him with his resignation and acceptance of his defeat at the end. I thought Brolin sitting down and looking around, and he quite literally shrugs his shoulders, and that's the end of him. And I just thought, wow, he is a pretty good damn actor, isn't he?
He's amazing. Seriously, everything he's done. And it's so funny. I've heard that for No Country for Old Men, they thought they were casting James Brolin as father when they got Josh, and Josh walks in and it's like, oh, is this going to work? And obviously it worked amazingly well. And I mean, God, he was a great George Bush in W.
Yeah, I know.
Oliver Stone's doing.
They got a whole series of great little pieces.
Absolutely.
My favorite part talking with him was telling me that he had no idea what he was doing when he was playing Cable, and he had so much fun on Thanos. And as soon as I saw Rob Liefeld, I rubbed that in. Anyway.
We got a couple more minutes, folks. Anything? We're like less than 5 minutes. Yes, sir.
So last year, Thanos snapped his fingers and he destroyed trillions of lives across the universe. And I just want to know, do you feel good about that?
I guess I gotta say yeah. And I've been trying to do it ever since, and no one disappears. Okay, not in this crowd, but I've had a few things at restaurants where I need a seat, you know, stuff like that.
Like probably 2 more questions if you're out there.
Try and make him less uncomfortable than that one.
Sir, the great.
What are characters you created? Which is your favorite one?
Ooh.
Oh, it's sort of a split between Thanos and Dreadstar. Thanos was my firstborn. Dreadstar is the most personal. In weird ways, a lot of what happened in his head was me working out stuff in my head. And so, those are the two. It's a real close with Pip the Troll behind me. That's because I love Jack Kirby. Yeah, it was based sort of on Jack.
In the hat, yes.
I can't talk about that.
Something must be in motion.
Yeah,
You can't talk about it.
Yeah. Next question.
Gentleman in the red.
Do you keep tabs on what, you know, what they do with Thanos now, like in the comics, and has there been any directions that you either like or dislike since?
No, I don't read things that I've done and then somebody else takes over. I tend to, they're not going to do what you're doing, and it's always a disappointment, and you don't want to muddy the water with the people you're dealing with. I mean, I like Donnie Gates, and I've told him that I'm not reading his book. I like Donnie, but, you know, I just tend to avoid things that I've worked on. You know, it's selfish, I know, but it's the way I operate. Yeah.
Well, Jim, I'm sorry, man, we gotta wrap, but I do want to say, it is so great to see creators like yourself be recognized for your work and have it go to this other media, and now millions of fans know about your contributions to comics and pop culture in general. So enjoy the victory lap. I'm really excited about the stuff that may be coming in the future, as we all are. And we just, on behalf of everyone, thank you for your contributions.